Alright everyone, Fujifilm just dropped their promised new high-resolution version of the XH2S. I kind of expected it to be called the XH2R, but that Fujifilm, so full of surprises, called it just the XH2. So, what other surprises lay in store? Well, my friends, I guess you'll just have to keep watching. Okay, so the XH2S has been out for a few months, and now that I own one, I've been furiously watching other YouTube reviews to soothe my ego and reassure myself that I indeed have a very good camera. Now, not only have those reviews reassured me, but if anything, I now understand that I have a monster of a camera in my arsenal, and shooting with it on a recent trip out west really sealed the deal for me. It's likely my full-frame Sony camera will be wearing a thin layer of dust from now on. So that brings us to the new version. Will I and other XH2S users find ourselves pining for more pixels? Well, let's compare the two and find out. The XH2 is nearly identical in every way to the S. Same body, same menu, same processor. What's different is the sensor. In favor of more pixel power, Fujifilm has done away with the stacked sensor. The big difference between the two is the photo resolution bump that takes us from 26 to 40 megapixels, and the video resolution that takes us from 6.2K 4:3 to 8K 16:9. Now, there are a few other things to cover, but let's start here. Taking a look at these photos of Toronto's finest example of modern condominium design, at full scale, obviously, we see no difference. Now, let's pounce in. Once scaled up significantly, there is a clear resolution advantage going to the XH2. But I have a secret weapon, and that's Adobe Photoshop's super resolution feature. Using this, I get a 103 megapixel image from the XH2's 26 megapixel RAW file. Comparing it to the other images, the result is quite impressive. So here's the caveat. Super resolution requires, obviously, an extra step, which doesn't suit everybody, and it can only really work with RAW files. As well, it exaggerates noise or chromatic aberration, and you can actually see a bit of that exaggerated noise in the sample we have here. So it's not perfect, but when trying to close the gap that is only really 14 megapixels, it's quite effective. My last caveat is that I haven't had the time to do real extensive testing. I got this camera 2 days ago, and so as a result, it's really just a first impressions kind of video. Perhaps over time, the value of 40 megapixels will become more evident. One additional feature I wasn't really able to test, but it is worth mentioning, is their pixel shift technology. Like the GFX models, the XH2 will take 20 images and merge them into a 160 megapixel image. There are a couple notes to make on this. One is that it requires separate software to make it merge, which surprised me because brands like Olympus do the same thing all in camera. Perhaps, just a guess here, that there is a quality reason that they do this, as the results from other brands have generally underwhelmed me. This is a function that really requires a very stable tripod, so I think Fujifilm's use case is towards archival purposes or maybe architecture or landscape with nothing moving, as anything moving in the frame will create distortions during acquisition. It will be interesting to really revisit this feature once the software supports this camera. Okay, let's look at the 8K versus the 6.2K of the XH2S. There is no question that the 8K video renders a noticeably more detailed image when observed close enough, which is about 2 feet away from my 16-inch screen. The super sampled 4K of the XH2 also shows more detail. Now, the 6.2K image of the XH2S lands somewhere between the two, and the softest of course being the 4K from the XH2S. So that of course begs the question, do you need 8K? Well, that depends. You need to consider how your audience is watching your video. Is it on a big screen close up or a small screen like a mobile device? Or do you want to be able to shoot wider and crop in like David Fincher? Even though I just said you can see a difference between the formats, it has everything to do with viewing angle. So how close or far away you are from the screen. Let me demonstrate, and of course, feel free to rewind the video and test this on different screens or viewing angles. Let's punch in on the 8K to 1080p. Now, if you're looking close up, it's not a good HD image at all. This isn't a hit on Fujifilm in any way, this is just quite typical. Doing the same thing on a $30,000 Red Cinema camera yields very similar results. For display on a large screen, I would never use this image. But if I was looking at this on a mobile device, one probably wouldn't even notice. So depending on your audience, 8K can either be incredibly versatile or like super way overkill. One dominant reason to go higher resolution, whether it's in stills or video, is the downscaling of noise. The high ISO quality continues to be astounding on the XH2. Scientifically speaking, it should be better than that of the XH2S because if you shoot in either 8K or super sampled 4K, your noise will be downscaled, making it even less apparent. Now, looking at our 6400 ISO example, you can see this, but it's as subtle as the differences between 6.2 and 8K would be. This is why both images look astonishingly clean when scaled to 4K. Let's also briefly look at high frame rates. The loss of the stack sensor means that the XH2 can only do rates above 60p in HD, and 4K 60 has a small 1.14 times crop. As expected, the 120p footage is acceptable out of the XH2, but somewhat underwhelming compared to that of the XH2S. And as expected, we also see stronger moire. Like every camera brand, this is the trade-off with high-resolution hybrid cameras. Whether you shoot 8K, 6K, or 4K, it's really a complex decision. It has as much to do about how you want to edit your footage as it does about who you're delivering your footage to. Now, I'm not going to say 8K isn't valuable, but the stack sensor of the XH2S gets me all the resolution I ever need, plus more high frame rate options and better rolling shutter performance. So I can't say that the 8K is really winning me over, considering, what the trade-offs are. Before we wrap up this video, I want to talk about another product that was highly anticipated from Fujifilm for 2022, and that is their 20-35 GF lens for the GFX series cameras. Now, this might be the sleeper hit of the summer, and the reason is that no other medium format camera has a very good, reliable zoom lens like Fujifilm, and having a wide zoom like this really completes their lineup nicely. At its widest, you will get a 60mm full frame equivalent that is outstanding in sharpness and distortion control. And this is a really great lens for architecture, street photography, landscapes, or fashion. Now, it may not seem like such a big deal, but to have these focal lengths in one lens certainly speeds up things for certain types of photography. I know firsthand that this has been a highly anticipated lens for GFX users. Okay, so let's close the book on this. It's not a question of whether the XH2 is a great camera. Its partner camera has already proven its worth. It's what I would call a niche camera. It speaks to a very specific type of photographer or videographer. Now, I honestly have no idea what the market numbers are on products like this, but every brand has made their own version of this duo. Sony, Canon, Panasonic, Nikon, etc. So clearly, there is a need or a desire for these specs. For most users, I really do believe that the XH2S will serve you very, very well. Those of you who need the XH2, like those shooting for large prints, landscape, etc., you're likely willing to part with the advantages of the stack sensor for some additional pixels that could really make a perceivable difference. And that is it for me for today. Thank you so much for watching. As always, please subscribe to this channel for more great videos like this and comment in the comment section below, yada, 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 algorithm, yada, yada, yada. Also though, I do want to know what you think of these high resolution cameras, when they're paired with the sort of the smaller resolution cameras. What do you think about 40 megapixels versus 26? And I say that very honestly because the differences for me were not so apparent. And I kind of want to know what you guys think. That's it. As always, for me, for now, for today, I'm out. Peace.